"What does this one say?" Emma asked me, pulling at my sleeve and gesturing to a headstone that had aged for so long the words were hardly visible. I crouched down and squinted at the moss-covered lettering. "Mary? Manny? I can't really tell, sweetie. What about this one?" She continued down the row. This was one of her favorite things to do, as morbid as that might seem. She was extremely interested in death for a 6-year-old, which might have alarmed me if she wasn't the sweetest kid in existence. When we first moved to our new home, I wasn't sure how she would feel about living so close to the cemetery. To my surprise, she asked me to take her over one chilly autumn morning. Since then, it had become an almost daily routine. We would make our way through the rows of headstones. Sometimes she would walk up to one and wonder about the person it belonged to. She treated them with a respect I couldn't have predicted, often offering kind words or placing flowers in front of them. She especially liked talking to the children who had died. Hearing her sing to them was beautiful in the most chilling way. "Okay, Emma, we should get going," I called over to her. She had long since left me behind while skipping down the aisles. "Wait, Papa, come see this," she yelled back, waving her hands. I signed, trudging over to where she was crouched. As I got closer, I saw that she was looking at a headstone that had fallen over. There were a few like that. She had been disappointed that I wasn't strong enough to pick them back up. "This one is Rory's," she said, quite upset. Rory was one of the first ones she remembered. We visited him every time we came. She was intrigued by his stone. It had angles carved into it, two across from each other, hands outstretched towards a heavenly light. He had died in 1896, born in 1888. "Sorry, Emma. Poor Rory." I felt bad, not really knowing what to say to make her feel better. His stone had been in rough shape. Deep cracks ran all the way through it, and when it had fallen, it had broken into several pieces. Emma picked up the small piece of the slate, shaking her head. "Emma, I'm sorry about Rory, but we should still get going. Don't worry, he's still going to be here when we come back," I told her. She came over to me and took my hand, looking like she might cry. We walked back to the house, me doing my best to get her mind on other things. I eventually got her to crack a smile. After that, I didn't think much of it. At bedtime, I came up to read her some stories. I sat on the edge of her bed and noticed something new on her nightstand, a jagged piece of slate. "Emma, I don't think you should have taken this." "But he's my friend," she cried. I wasn't really sure what to do. This was actually making my skin crawl. "Sweetie, you never met him, okay? I know that you think he's special and everything, but this is like stealing. He wouldn't want you to take this," I said. "Yes, he would. He's my friend." She was getting really worked up. I thought for a moment, "We'll take it back tomorrow." Although she wasn't satisfied with it, she stopped the meltdown she was building up to. We finished our books and I tucked her in, then went downstairs to start the dishes. I told my wife about the piece of slate. "You're making her take it back? Why?" she asked, to my surprise. "Simone, isn't that like bad luck or something? You don't think that's creepy as hell?" "Well, yeah, but you know how she is. She's been talking to the kid for a while now. If he can hear her, he must know that she only has the best intentions." Now I was second-guessing myself. After Simone went to bed, I stayed up. I went out to the back porch and sat in the chilly air. The wind picked up after a while, and it started to drizzle soon after. The tin roof above me kept a steady rhythm that put me into a trance. I may have dozed off if it hadn't been for the whispering. Instantly, I sat upright. It was faint and nothing was clear, but I was definitely hearing someone. I stood up and listened through the rain, realizing it was coming from the front of the house. I bolted around the corner and saw a sliver of light from the front hallway shining out into the night. The front door was open. I burst through the entryway and careened up the stairs, heading straight to Emma's room. Sure enough, her door was wide open, her bed empty. The piece of slate wasn't on the nightstand. What are you? Simone had come out of our bedroom, looking at me with bleary eyes. Emma's missing. The front door was open, I screeched. Simone's face went white. Oh my God, Nate, she left a note, she said, looking towards the bedroom door. Sure enough, scribbled on a sticky note was her message. Simone held it up with shaking hands. Went with Rory. My legs nearly gave out. I blasted back down the steps with tunnel vision, sprinting out into the rain that was now pouring down. I barely had any breath left by the time I got to the cemetery gates. Rory's resting place was on the furthest end of the grounds. I tried to make out my daughter's figure in the darkness as I made my way towards it. I fell to my knees when I got close enough to see his plot. There was fresh dirt piled in front of Rory's collapsed headstone, the tiny piece of slate resting on top. I met Simone at the cemetery gates, nearly crashing into her in the dark. She shined a flashlight in my eyes. "Where are you going?" she screeched as I continued past her. "I have to get a shovel. She's in the grave." I didn't wait for her to respond, doubt me, or listen to her frantic cries as I dashed back to the house. I took my shovel from the shed and sprinted back, my out-of-shape body driven by pure terror. Simone caught me by the arm as I ran toward Rory's plot. "Nate, we should call for help." "Who are you going to call exactly? No one is going to believe this," I replied, reaching the fresh dirt and sticking the shovel in. Pouring rain was picking up, the wind throwing it all straight into my face. Simone bent down and picked up the piece of Rory's grave, turning it over and staring at it in disbelief. "Do you think he took her because she brought this home?" she asked. I grunted something non-committal, not wanting to entertain the idea that we were dealing with an actual specter, even though that was my exact fear. After a while, the shovel began sinking deeper, the empty space beneath surprising me. Simone's flashlight shone down inside, making both of us gasp. It appeared to be a tunnel. Without much thought, I started lowering myself in, Simone still frozen to the spot. "Nate, you can't go in there. I'm calling for help," she insisted. "Call if you want. I can't waste any time. Give me that flashlight." She passed it down, seeming unsure whether to follow or call for help. I didn't wait to find out, shining the light down the tunnel and crawling forward. It got narrower as I went. I ignored the claustrophobia threatening to overtake me. "Emma! Emma! Where are you?" I called, my voice echoing slightly. I could feel the ground getting colder, telling me I was getting deeper into the earth. Eventually, I could see a large opening coming up, some kind of chamber. Cautiously, I entered. For the first time, I was able to stand. The ceiling was at least 20 feet high. Words had been carved into the moist dirt all the way to the top. I tried reading a few, but they overlapped quite a bit, making them difficult to make out. I was having a hard time believing any of this was real, wanting for myself to flail awake and realize it was all some kind of nightmare. Across from me, there appeared to be another long tunnel. I looked at the ground and realized there was a path in the dirt. It looked to be made from rotting wood. When I got closer, I could see what they were. The road was paved with caskets, pieces of them sewn together and making a twisted path. My body was beyond fatigue. I was aching everywhere. Adrenaline the only thing that kept me moving. This tunnel was much longer than the first had been. I was glad to be able to traverse it standing up. Finally, something at the end of the tunnel was illuminating its walls. I shut the flashlight off, not wanting to give myself away. Voices crept towards me through the tunnel. Goosebumps spread over me. Terrified of what I was going to find, fear was making my teeth chatter. As I reached the end, torchlight flickered, giving me a small glimpse into the hall before me. I had to cover my own mouth to keep from screaming out. It was hard to process the scene before me. Hundreds of corpses were walking about, some more decayed than others. They all seemed to be gathering around something. Their writhing bodies obscured my view of what it was. I knew Emma was down here. I needed to find her, but my limbs were useless. They wouldn't respond to me. I tried to think of my plan. What would happen if they saw me? Would they devour me? Like every zombie movie that has ever been made. Had they already ripped Emma to shreds, her final moments spent in agony? The thought made bile rise in my throat. While I had been trying to think what to do, I heard footsteps coming from behind me on the casket walkway. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to go, but in the vast hall. On the fly, I reached down and grabbed handfuls of soil, rubbing it onto my skin quickly. As the footsteps rounded the corner, I ducked into the hall. Fortunately, none of the dead bodies seemed to notice my sudden appearance. I stayed close to the walls, trying my best not to draw attention to myself. Seconds after I had slipped in, the group who would have spotted me arrived. One of them a small boy with thick blonde hair that curled at the tips. He was holding hands with Emma. My stomach dropped, realizing that Rory was leading her towards the mass of undead creatures who were gathered at the center of the hall. As soon as they saw her, they dispersed, some bowing and pointing their hands towards what they had been busy building. It was a throne. It was made from bones. Some of the more decomposed bodies were missing limbs, undoubtedly ripping them away to contribute to the structure. Emma put her hands to her mouth with glee when she saw it. Rory smiled at her, one side of his face wide open and crawling with maggots. I did my best to keep from rushing over and grabbing her away. I had no idea what to do. They outnumbered me by nearly 1,000. What would happen to her if I stood by idly though? I had to do something. Emma finally walked up to the throne and took a seat. She raised her arms above her head, clearly overjoyed by the hospitality she was receiving. The bile in my throat started to spill out. I was disgusted and afraid for what might come next. As one, every corpse in the hall knelt down, bowing before her. I realized too late that I hadn't joined them. Emma's head glanced over at me, her already gigantic smile getting even wider. "Papa!" she exclaimed, rising from the throne and staring at me. My blood froze as the mass of bodies around me shot upright and turned to look at me. In seconds they had swarmed, reaching their grotesque hands out and picking me up into the air. I screamed and screamed, begging for them to let us go. None of them responded, crowd surfing me up to Emma. My feet felt the ground again. "Papa, what are you doing here?" Her delighted voice echoed through the dead silent hall. Rory was beside her, looking at me with what might have been a grin. "I came to get you. We have to get out of here." I panicked, looking at the large crowd surrounding us. Rory walked towards me, his grin widening. "Sir, I meant no harm to your daughter," he spoke hoarsely. It seemed he hadn't spoken in centuries. His dry lips crackled with each syllable. I shuddered, unsure of what to say. Emma grabbed my hand. "Papa, they threw me this party. Look how nice they are." The crowd around us was silent, all with giant smiles on their faces, or at least the ones that still had faces. "Emma has made us all feel loved. We haven't felt love in so long. When she took my offering, she released me from my bonds, allowed me to come above the earth once more. I only felt it was proper for me to thank her." Rory again spoke, looking at me with sincerity in his good eye, the other rolling wildly. My heart felt something. It was warmth, pride for my daughter. I looked over to her, tears in my eyes. "Well, sweetie, I let you get back to your party," was all I could manage. With that, the mass of bodies bowed again, hailing the little girl who had brought life back to their withered bodies. Emma sat on her throne, beaming at me, as I too took a knee and stretched my hands towards her. "All hail Emma, Queen of the Dead."